Alright trainers, welcome to another episode of Raid Royale. I'm TaeganAdventures, and this is probably a legendary that you wouldn't have expected is coming back, especially with all these Gen 5 legendaries in Pokemon Go recently. But this weekend, Ho-Oh is coming to Tier 5 raids in Pokemon Go. So alongside Zekrom, you'll be finding Ho-Oh in Tier 5 raids in Pokemon Go as part of Pokemon Go's 4th anniversary. Now, Ho-Oh has been a legendary that has been around probably since the dawn of raids in Pokemon Go, but a lot has changed since Ho-Oh first came to raids in Pokemon Go, including the new counters. All the new Gen 4 and Gen 5 counters that have been recently added into the game are now pretty much viable for countering Ho-Oh in raids. So let's just dive right into Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is a fire and flying type, meaning it is weak to rock, electric, and water type attacks, with its rock weakness being a double weakness, so it takes extra damage from rock type attacks. Naturally, you want to bring in more rock types in on Ho-Oh, but Ho-Oh does have its own coverage moves to deal with its weaknesses, including Solar Beam, one of its charge moves. Definitely helps deal with the rock types, as well as the water types used to counter Ho-Oh. Although Ho-Oh has a glaring weakness to rock type moves, rock types should be used with caution because of Solar Beam. Ho-Oh does have its stat moves such as Fire Blast and Brave Bird as charge moves, and for its quick moves, it has Extrasensory, Hidden Power, which can be any type, and Steel Wing. Now, these are just purely for coverage and shouldn't really impact your raid battling too much, unless Hidden Power is a type that is super effective on your raid party. Ho has the legendary stats to back up its legendary status: base 214 HP, base 239 attack, and base 244 defense. It does have a lot of defense, so it needs a lot of people to take down. I suggest a group size of around 4 to 6 people. Slightly less than Zekrom because it is pretty easy to take out with rock-type Pokemon. And speaking of rock-type Pokemon, there are lots of rock-type Pokemon you can bring in on a Ho-Oh raid. Of course, you have your trusty Tyranitar with a very high TDO, comparable to most of the legendaries. I don't need to say any further than a Tyranitar with Smackdown and Stone Edge. By far one of the best rock-type attackers in Pokemon Go. We do have a few new entries in the rock-type roster, including Terrakion with Smackdown and Stone Edge, a new entry that was introduced last year when Terrakion came in legendary raids. Apart from that, we have Rhyperior with its community day moveset of Smackdown and Rock Wrecker. Really good DPS, really good TDO, and in fact, if you have a Rhyperior and not Tyranitar, definitely use Rhyperior with the Rock Wrecker, not Earthquake, because Ho-Oh is immune to the Earthquake. If you want to go for hyper DPS and just raw offense, Rampardos is your best bet because it has the highest DPS here among all of the rock types. Rampardos with Smackdown and Rock Slide will be the best bet. Unfortunately, due to its very low defense as well as its weakness to Solar Beam, it's definitely not one of the best in the TDO department. And speaking of Solar Beam, you want to use your rock and water types with caution here. Ho-Oh has a pretty beastly attack, and for someone like Rampardos who has a really frail defense, it's not ideal to send in a Rampardos on a Solar Beam Ho-Oh. Honorable mentions to Gigalith and Landorus, although Landorus isn't really a rock type. It has rock type moves in Rock Throw and Stone Edge. They don't have stab because Landorus itself is not a rock type. Gigalith unfortunately has a pretty lackluster DPS and TDO, slightly worse than Tyranitar, so if you already have a Tyranitar from Community Day, you might as well use a Tyranitar. Now on to the electric type Pokemon. You have the standard Raikou. Since Generation 2 came in Pokemon Go, Raikou has been a beast, both literally and its status as a beastly Pokemon. Wild Charge on Raikou is strongly preferable over Thunderbolt because of the extra TDO and DPS that it brings. Magnezone can also be used in this scenario, but it's pretty much on the lower end of the DPS spectrum, so you want to keep it in the backseat for now. As a ray of optimism, we do have a new boy on the block, Zekrom himself. If you have already caught yourself a good Zekrom with ideally Thundershock and Wild Charge, definitely bring it in on a Ho-Oh. I already discussed how good Zekrom is in battle, namely in PvP, and it's also pretty good in raid boss fights as well. I would highly recommend Zekrom, Tyranitar, Terrakion, and Rock Wrecker Rhyperior. Honorable mentions go out to Zapdos with Thundershock, as well as Luxray with Spark and Wild Charge. Luxray's TDO is on the very low side, so use a Zekrom in place of a Luxray or a Zapdos. If you don't have Raikou, you can use a Zapdos in place of Raikou as well. Zapdos and Raikou are pretty much interchangeable basically. You can pick your poison on Zapdos or Raikou, but the one perk about using a Zapdos is that it resists Solar Beam. So if you're facing a Solar Beam Ho-Oh, definitely bring in some Zapdoses. Zapdai. I don't know what the plural of Zapdos is, but definitely use Zapdos on a Solar Beam Ho-Oh. And last but not least, we have the water types. And honestly, the water types are kinda meh here because most of these are weak to grass type moves such as Ho-Oh's Solar Beam. So let's just go over these water types real quick. First off, we have Empoleon. I'm not going to be biased here. Empoleon is one of the best water types for a Ho-Oh. Because it is part steel type, it actually takes neutral damage from Solar Beam instead of taking super effective damage like the other water types. Of course, you'd want to use Empoleon's Community Day move, Hydro Cannon, which is far superior to any of its other charge moves. Kyogre is a pretty good substitute for Empoleon, with about the same DPS and more TDO than Empoleon. Either Surf or Hydro Pump as Kyogre's charge moves, although Thunder works as well, it is slightly less viable due to the lack of stab. Palkia, although not having a water type fast move, is still pretty decent actually. Ideally, you want to be using Dragon Tail and Aqua Tail because it has the most DPS and TDO. It ranks similarly to a Waterfall and Hydro Pump Kyogre. So if you don't already have a Hydro Pump Kyogre, use a Surf Kyogre or a Palkia with Dragon Tail and Aqua Tail. Honorable mention goes out to Swampert for being a water type as well. Pretty strong in the Great League of the Go Battle League. Goes out to Swampert for being a water type as well. Pretty strong in the Great League of the Go Battle League, but it is double weak to Solar Beam, so not really ideal to bring it in on a Solar Beam Ho-Oh, needless to say. Now, if you're wondering about Ho-Oh's 100% IV CPs, they are 2207 in non-weather boosted conditions, which is any other weather apart from sunny or windy, and 2759 in weather boosted conditions, which is in windy and sunny weather in Pokemon Go. Best weather to hunt for a Ho-Oh is in windy weather because you'll be getting weather boosted Ho-Ohs without getting a boost in its Fire Blast or Solar Beam, especially Solar Beam being the big issue here for a very potent charge move, covers a lot of its weaknesses. So if you live in an area with lots of windy weather, that is the perfect time to hunt for a Ho-Oh in Pokemon Go. If you don't live in a windy area, partly cloudy weather is still pretty suitable because it boosts the rock type attacks of your rock type Pokemon, making them even stronger. That means you'll need fewer people to take on Ho-Oh in partly cloudy weather. In sunny weather, that is when you want to exercise lots of caution because Ho-Oh is weather boosted, and so is its Fire Blast and Solar Beam attacks, making them way more powerful. And don't even get me started on using the rock or water types in that scenario because they'll get one-shot. And last but not least, if you live in an area with rainy weather, you would want to bring out your electric and water type Pokemon because they'll be weather boosted in the rain, making their stab moves even stronger. But like I said, with Solar Beam and water types, yeah, they're not a good mix at all. Solar Beam just straight up OHKO's water type Pokemon, so just really be careful when bringing in any water or rock type Pokemon in on a Ho-Oh. Now I would love to go over Ho-Oh's PvP prowess, but unfortunately it hasn't seen much PvP usage here. It is, however, a very good Pokemon in raids, especially with the amount of coverage it gets. But now with Earthquake as an elite TM move on Ho-Oh, I predict that Ho-Oh will see a lot more usage in PvP, especially in the Master League tier of the Go Battle League, with Earthquake covering for its electric weakness as well as its rock weakness, and Solar Beam covering for its rock and water type weaknesses, as well as Fire Blast and Brave Bird for stab, Extra Sensory for its quick move, and let's not forget its ease in defeating Machamps. Yeah, it's gonna see a lot more usage. It is definitely gonna put Ho-Oh up in viability in terms of the coverage department. The only downside being that Earthquake, Fire Blast, and Solar Beam are all 1 bar charge moves, meaning they have really long charge times in PvP, so I really don't know how good it will actually be in PvP, but I mean, if Ho is great in PvP, only time will tell. So that pretty much wraps up this episode of Raid Royale, taking a brief look at Ho and the strategy to beating a Ho raid in Pokemon Go. Hopefully you have enjoyed this episode of Raid Royale, and for the neo players, hopefully you have learned something from this episode. And if you're a veteran who just came back into Pokemon Go after a long break, hopefully this episode will give you all the materials and resources you need to kickstart your re-entry back into Pokemon Go. With all that being said, this has been TaeganAdventures, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.